So let's begin by talking about the cello suites themselves. I think it's safe to say that just about anybody, whether they listen to classical music or not, have heard that very first movement from the first suite in G major. But there's a whole unexplored world that lies ahead for a lot of listeners. Tell us about how the cello suites came into being, and then we'll talk about Anna Magdalena.
Sure. Well, the cello suites were composed in back in 1720. Bach was working at the court in Köthen, which is near Leipzig, about an hour drive from Leipzig these days. And Prince Leopold loved music. He was passionate about it, and Bach had the freedom to write whatever chamber music he dreamed up, and he had the best players around him. So other than that, there's a lot of mystery that surrounds these pieces, and Bach's own manuscript, the copy that he was composing with, has been lost to history. Fortunately, Bach's second wife, Maria Barbara, who was not technically around at that time with Bach, so a couple of years later, she got a hold of, at that time, Bach's manuscript, and she copied it. And she was a great copyist. She meticulously copied his handwriting and articulations. And over the years, there's been some controversy around it. Many people feel that she was in a rush to copy many manuscripts of Bach, and so she made mistakes. But actually, there's just a vast amount of information and clues. And so you're kind of a detective looking at this manuscript and trying to figure out what was the original intention of Bach with these pieces.
So the original manuscript was lost, and we have this version from Bach's second wife. But there's also another version, right?
There's another version by Joseph Kellner, who was thought to be a student of Bach. He's not really. That's been debunked. He wasn't really a student of Bach, but he sort of was following Bach and learning from Bach, and he made a copy with more mistakes than Anna Magdalena. But it's useful. It's close to the period he knew Bach. But with Anna Magdalena, it's really as close as we can get for now until that other manuscript turns up and the original one.
Well, she had some experience in copying his music. I mean, she was a singer, so she was an accomplished musician.
She was a great musician, and the copy that she made is gorgeous. I mean, it has very few mistakes actually of pitch. I mean, she corrects a few things, and the question is, for us, where the articulations are. There are these slurs over the notes, and we labor over where to put them. and are they 2 notes, 3 notes, 4 notes to a bow? And that's where it starts to get interesting and very much like decoding a language, like getting a tablet from a dead language and trying to figure out what it means and what the symbols mean. And, even in Bach's own handwriting, if this ever turns up, if we have the original, still we will not see, hardly any dynamic markings, any indication to the performer of whether to play loud or soft or gradations of that. We won't see any tempo indications. It'll be dance movements, but very rarely will it have allegro or adagio or sort of indications of whether he thought it should be slow or fast, or within that it's precisely how fast it should be. So right. there's an incredible sense of trust and also a sense of performance practice that Bach expected the performer to do certain things right and to bring certain rules to the music, and at the same time he was leaving it open for interpretation for the player to find their own way through this forest.
You talk about the articulation. I mean, dynamics is one thing, and tempo is another thing. But talk a little bit for the layperson, what kind of a difference it makes if two notes are slurred together or if they're not slurred together. I mean, how does that affect your interpretation?
That's a very, very good question, and it really does affect, I would say, even the larger form of the movement. If you realize that there are a lot more separate notes in Anna Magdalena's manuscript compared to many of the editions out there, and what that creates is a sense of speaking, a sense of articulation, and also the idea that with a Baroque bow, as I'm playing on this recording, the down bow and the up bow are not the same. The down bow is thought to be the noble stroke. It's the stronger stroke, and the up bow is weaker, and it's Vilus, it comes from in Latin the vile stroke. Actually, it's the bad stroke. So you realize that when you have a piece for a solo instrument, that Bach is exploring this idea of mock polyphony, the idea that there is more than one voice happening at any one time. You want to bring certain voices out, like let's say the bass line. So you put that on a down bow. You put something else on an up bow to put it in relief, and the combination of that, once you start adding the articulations, the slurs, then it's the differences between legato or sort of seamless playing and one that is a little bit more speaking or choppier, and that's when the grammar of the phrase and the sense of rhetoric to these lines starts to emerge. And we can get into it over a whole day, in terms of the subtlety and nuance of this. But if you just look at the opening bars of the very first prelude of the first suite, you realize, you've heard so many interpretations of that, and you've heard, Pablo Casals playing 8 notes to a bow, and that creates a kind of watery effect. And then you look at a Baroque cellist, many of them putting the 3 slur on the first 3 notes, and then the rest separate, and so you get sort of this triad to begin. And what I've done is something a little different. I agree with the 3 slur, but I move it over to sort of bring out the upper voice. So you have a bass voice with the first 16th note, you have a middle voice with the second 16th note, and then you have 3 notes to one bow, bringing out this kind of lower neighbor figure in the upper voice. And all of a sudden, for me, it starts to take life and starts to really make more sense to me, in that those 3 voices emerge clearly and form kind of the basis and the whole, give us the parameter for all 6 suites. The idea that it's not just one pretty melody after another, but actually independent lines working together to create a larger whole, despite the fact that the cello is essentially a one-voice instrument.
Well, it seems to me also, obviously your articulation choices were influenced by this manuscript that you're going back to, the Anna Magdalena manuscript, but it seems to me that those choices would also be influenced by your own personality as a performer, your own history with the piece. You've been playing these pieces for a long time, haven't you?
I have, but for this recording, I've changed everything. I mean, I compared even to 15 years ago, the recording I made early on, my articulations are so different. I'm really trying to be as faithful as I can now to the Anna Magdalena, because even when she's inconsistent, I'm asking myself at all times, does she mean to be inconsistent? Is there a reason for this? And there's a sequence down, and the slur changes a little bit, or is it intended for me, the performer, to make it consistent, or and vice versa? So there's a lot of room for my own decisions and interpretation of this music, but with the articulations, I'm really trying to get as close as I can to what the original idea was. Bach, he really knew these instruments. He had a conception, and he was trying to bring certain things out. And he doesn't give us a whole lot in terms of dynamics and other aspects, but at the very least, he gives us these articulations, and it's worth thinking about them. And there are moments, for example, where it's really an anomaly. In the fourth suite prelude, after kind of a sea of eighth notes, you go and go with these arpeggios, and then all of a sudden it comes to a stop on the C sharp, the leading tone to the leading tone, within E flat major, and he follows it up with I think it's like 32 or 33 notes on one bow. It's quite an incredible effect, and very dramatic, and I think it's worth doing. We sort of make it easy on ourselves, and we break up the bow and take a couple of bows there, but actually suffering and putting all those notes on one bow, you realize Bach might have been going for a certain kind of effect, a ghostly effect.
Well, I've always thought that these suites represent Bach as at his most romantic, at his most expressive.
That's nicely put. Definitely, yes.
How does your actual physical instrument affect the choices you make? I know that you commissioned a bow for this recording, right?
I did. David Hawthorne in Cambridge, Massachusetts, wonderful maker. I just love this bow. Whether I'm playing on gut strings or on metal strings, if I'm playing Bach, I now use my Baroque bow. Even when I'm demonstrating for my students, I bring out my Baroque bow to play for them. And everything about the recording and the idea of Baroque, hip playing, historically informed performance, it's all about resonance, and the idea that the philosophy of sound was so different in Baroque times than it is today. Today we can defy nature, and we can sustain with the modern bow, and we can kind of, whether you're at the tip of the bow or the frog, the lower part, you can make it sound the same. But with a Baroque bow, it really is much weaker at the tip than it is at the frog, and so it's also much lighter. So I talk about it like cars, like for me the Baroque bow is like my Porsche, it's my sports car. And the modern bow is like a pickup truck. It's a lot heavier and it doesn't move quite as quickly. But
not quite as subtle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But of course, you can do everything with the modern bow too. But it's so nice with this music to have. I mean, the gut strings are all about resonating the sound, and so there's more resonance. There might not be as much volume as the metal, but it's more resonant. Bringing down the pitch to 415 makes the strings vibrate more, and so what happens is everything between the notes starts to really get very rich, and all this resonance creates a sense of polyphony and a sense that one cello can sound like a whole orchestra.
you've been playing this for a long time, obviously, where you're kind of raised on these suites. So do you feel that you have a handle on it now, like this is where you want the suites to go for you, or do you think that there's more to this story, there are more discoveries to be made?
Well, I hope in my lifetime we find the original manuscript. That would be nice. I talk to my two girls all the time about it, and we have all kinds of interesting stories, like, maybe one of the 20 Bach kids made origami eggs out of the manuscript paper or something, or put it under dishes and it just got lost. Who knows? But that would be nice. But with this music, it's a lifetime. It's a Bible. You return to this book over and over again, and even within hours of recording this music, you start to hear different ideas and different feeling about what this music is about. So, and on a daily basis, you feel differently. You go through different things in life, and then you return to this music, and it takes on such a different meaning. And every place I've played this music now in many rock clubs and jazz clubs, and now concert halls and theaters and outdoors in parks and hospitals and just anywhere. It takes on a completely different meaning. I mean, there's nothing like hearing the saraband of the Fifth Suite, for example, at a memorial service. People can talk and memorialize the individual, and then you suddenly hear these strains of Bach, just a very simple one voice line, and everybody just falls apart at hearing that. So it's music that can withstand time and just is there's a universality about it, and I'm sure that in 15 years I'm gonna feel very strongly in a very different direction and want to redo my Bach. But for now, I look forward to people experiencing it in this way and looking at how different it is from 15 years ago.
Cellist Matt Haimovitz, whose latest release, The Cello Suites According to Anna Magdalena, is out this month. And Matt, we want to thank you for joining us today here on FM 91.
Great pleasure to be with you. Thanks a lot.